focusing on that why and believing in your why and being able to articulate your why with confidence is something that I would encourage every single leader to really hold on to and be bold about.
Hi there, I'm Bex Craig, and you're listening to the Not Just Anything podcast for women who want it whole. I hope you'll join me each week as we hear extraordinary stories from women around the world about how they have curated a whole life by design rather than by default. On today's episode, I'm speaking to Vicky Skipp, who is Workplace by Facebook's head of Asia Pacific and Japan. I've been lucky enough to know Vicky for almost a decade and have watched her people-first approach to leadership support not only her phenomenal journey, but also the transformation of loads of people around her. Vicky shares her insights into authentic leadership, her own truths, and also the moments in her career that she feels have really propelled her to becoming the person that she is today. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Let's get stuck in. A very, very big warm welcome to Vicky Skipp, who's joining me from Sydney this morning. Vicky, how are you?
I am really good, Bex. Thank you so much for having me this morning, day after Mother's Day, which I hope was wonderful for you.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you. And same to you. And what a perfect day to talk about all things related to sort of career and motherhood and all the things that I'm sure that we're going to get started on. So thanks for mentioning that and for getting us started there as well.
Absolutely.
I've been really looking forward to our conversation. And perhaps we can start with filling people in on the story of you, of who you are and how you have become the person that you are today.
Thank you, Beck. And, many years ago, I started off in tech support and customer service. And it's one of those careers that you walk into not knowing what's ahead of you, what the tech industry means to you, the scope of your role. It's nothing that anybody says, when I grow up, I want to be a tech support engineer. And so I was very fortunate because I had a very hardworking mom who's always been my role model. And while I was finishing my studies, my mom would, during her lunchtime, go out and look for a job for me. And she was very worried, being in South Africa, that my twin sister and I wouldn't have a job. And so during her lunchtime, she'd pace all of the buildings. She was in a corporate and she'd pace the buildings and visit organizations and ask them if they had any roles. And one day,
amazing,
she came home and said, guess what? You start your first job tomorrow. And it's literally down the road from me. We can go into work together in the mornings and you're going to start earning a salary. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. Am I not going to have a break? And she's like, well, let's just jump into it and let's see what happens. And, it was amazing because I think if I waited anymore, I would have wanted a gap year and another gap year. And she really showed me what, jumping into things with courage and with faith meant. And she knew how important it was for me to work because I was very independent and get a job that I could really sink my teeth into. And then, from there, it was a pretty short tenure in tech support. I worked for an organization that was acquired by an American company. And very quickly, they believed I was meant for sales and told me that, if you're going to succeed in life, you need to sell. You need to sell something because that's what's really true to you and that's where your DNA lies. And I didn't believe it. I didn't want to be in sales. No one grows up wanting to be in sales. And, think about this, the 90s where cold calling is starting and there's no such thing as call centers just yet. And it's about building relationships over the phone. And I remember one day a senior leader had come down who was head of internationals to our office in Cape Town. And he gave me a list of people and he said, you're not going to go home today until you've called all of these people and you've sent them a demo CD. And I said to him, hold on a minute, I've never done this in my life before. What am I actually selling? And he said, you'll figure it out. Anyway, by the end of the day, and with plenty of time to spare, I'd spoken to every one of them. I had a CD sent out to everybody of the demo software that I was selling at the time, or supposedly supposed to be selling at the time. And I started getting, my biggest fan, my biggest investor, my boss, telling me that I need to do something that I had no idea around the skill that was needed or what I need to do to be successful. And so from there, he became my champion in my very first company and helped me build out an inside sales motion, sent me to Europe. to learn some of the best practices. Then basically from one president's club to the next, I built out my sales career, went into major accounts, and then into leadership. So, it's just been one of those early starters where you have people who believe in you and you have people who back you no matter what. It can take you anywhere. It's brought me to Australia. Actually, in fact, that same manager brought me to Australia in 2000. And I got the opportunity to work for an organization and take my first leadership role in Channel, again, an area I hadn't had exposure in, to build out a team, because people were so important to me in the development of people and building out successful motions within organizations. And, having those people around you to learn from and grow from, and who understand your DNA and understand what your core values are, and to build on that were phenomenal. So I'm really fortunate to have had some people in my very early careers who really trusted me.
Yeah, it sounds like it even from the outset with your mum, who really stood behind you and I guess was that wind behind your wings to propel you forward into your career. But it also sounds like, as you've described it, that people are a big part of your story of quote unquote success. And obviously now you are incredibly successful leader in technology, running the region for Workplace at Facebook. Yeah. And so by all accounts, then obviously you have also demonstrated what you can do when you take that support from other people around you and translate that into success. And so how do you, just to kind of go with that theme of success, how do you think about success, or how have you thought about success over your career and where you are now?
Beck, it's changed significantly. If I had to take a step back, and I'm not sure whether the changes are tied to any single thing, but success probably 15 years ago to success today are two different things. Success 15 years ago was a great leadership role in a tech company that was going places with a great share price, managing a team of people with an amazing culture, and just, living your best life as far as coming to work every day and winning. And that was great, because there's time to do that and you want to do that. Since then, and if you had to ask me this morning what I think success is having harmony in your work life and your home life and with your family life, and being able to balance those. And sometimes you have to compromise and sometimes you don't. And, being able to make choices every day around what's more important to you. Is my family more important to me today? And how can I work with that professionally? How can I make sure that I make that up in my professional life and find time to do that? And then how can I balance the care of my family and the development of myself with all of that? And it's being able to, be consciously aware of where your focus needs to be. At the same time, it doesn't take away from, building winning teams and great cultures and making sure that, you have a diverse set of beliefs and thought around the people that you work with. But it's being able to have choices so that you can bring your best self to various situations. And so, success is a big word, and I think it needs to be pliable. It needs to change and morph into who we become. And, a big fancy title isn't always, successful necessarily, because we've got to be aware of putting ourselves first, and our well-being first. You're seeing extreme leadership burnout at the moment because, we've gone through such an interesting time with the pandemic where people have put themselves at the front or at the cost of the pandemic by doing so much more work that they aren't spending time with their families, and that they're in front of the screen between 11 and 14 hours a day, which we know there's no longevity around. And so being conscious of companies that support your mental health and well-being is equally important, and I would say attributes to your success too.
There's so much in that answer that I want to kind of go explore. And so hopefully we can do it in a methodical way. But the one thing that I love that you described there is this evolution of how we think about ourselves and how we think about our life. And one thing that we talk a lot, that I talk a lot about with women on the show, is about a whole life, all the different elements that make them who they are. That's why the show's called Not Just Anything. You are not just the head of APAC for, this huge tech company. You are so much more multifaceted, so much more multidimensional than that. And embracing all of those things is a really important first step towards and acknowledging the different parts that make you who you are. You said it wasn't a single point in time, and I can totally understand that. But what do you think has helped you lean in more to that idea, or embrace more this idea that I am not just my title and my career?
When you work for an organization that puts people first, you start really thinking about your truths. You start thinking about where you can be your best self, and you start questioning where you put your time and what motivates you and what your purpose is. And I think it just opens your eyes to new ideas of how you want to invest and grow as an individual, which is going to result in the impact that you're going to make. And that's really where you double down on that focus. Where organizations put people first, people start focusing more on their strengths and more on their outcomes. And I think it's about, not necessarily working harder, but just being smart at what you want to do. I'm such a big believer in doing a few things well versus doing many things. But it really is about a people first motion, and having that time and that latitude to focus on where you've done great and how you replicate that. And what was it that I did great?
For those of us listening and getting curious, like, how do you then describe or think about your best self, or how you are more people first in your own self?
I think there's two things. The first thing is the people who are around you. I don't know if you've been in a meeting where things just go wrong. The person that you're having a conversation with, you just can't align with. And in turn, your response may not be the right type of response. And so when you become conscious of what you don't want, you become even more conscious around what you do want. And so the people that you are around is so important, because we extract greatness from each other when we motivate each other, and when we put each other in situations where they can be amazing, where they can understand what's important to them. The second area is, how do I really understand my true self? It's when I'm in a tough situation. It's when I don't know the answer to things, and I have to ask questions, and I have to go out and research and get more data points around situations. And so understanding, those gaps, that's really where I thrive, because I know I've got opportunity to learn and grow and develop. So really finding my best self is when I'm around people where I feel I can bring the attributes out that I know I'm great at. And that's building teams and motivating people and understanding where they thrive and where they, need a leg up, where they need a little bit more support, and where they need some investment. So I think one is understanding where you're not great and being around people who do bring you down, and understanding what that looks like and pulling that away, and then moving yourself to a position where you are around people who make you feel good and you do good as a result.
I think it is so important. I mean, there's some lots of research on this about the people that you surround yourself with and what that means energetically and what that means in terms of, what you then can become. And so I do think curating the people that are around you is really essential. And I love that you also talk about kind of this is how I know you as well. Somebody that really invests in people, knows how to connect to people and what might motivate them, and bringing them on that journey as well. And so you mentioned also in your previous answer a bit about what the pandemic has then meant for leaders like someone like you that is so connected to people, so invested in your team and your business. What has this experience of leading through this pandemic, how have you had to tap into your best self to support that context as well as possible?
The first thing when we think about the pandemic and how I've led through the pandemic and being aware of the impact of the pandemic, the first thing is I've had to be very aware of how I feel. Because if I'm working long hours and if my video is always on and people are seeing me, 15, 16 hours a day working, they are going to do the same. And so I've got to be very aware of how I pitch up every day, because I know that that's not sustainable. And by Friday, I'm going to be burning out and my family are going to take the toll of my exhaustion. Towards the end of last year, I started noticing people in our team, it's probably mid last year, people in our team were exhausted. They were taking a lot of PTO. They needed the time out. They weren't well. And so I started introducing an initiative called our Mental Health and Wellbeing Day. And it's a day that we run now quarterly for people just to take time out and focus on what helps them thrive. And it's a work day, but it's a day when you extract yourself from the organization and you bring yourself into an area where you with your child, or you have a date with your family, and you start the day with yoga and meditation. And it's really about investing in you and your mental well-being. And really focusing on where you feel you need to be enriched. It could be taking a course, but as long as it's not work, it's an important day for us. And so when I saw that, and I thought about an initiative that would match some of the burnout that we saw, and that was, of course, complemented by some other initiatives within Facebook around off days and what we brought as COVID leave. We have to be aware of, as leaders, of how many hours we're online for when we're responding to emails. I now make a very conscious effort not to send posts on Workplace after 5:30 in the afternoon, because people will feel like they need to read and respond to a post, or not to make an important announcement on the weekend. And if I am going to share something, when is the prime time to share it? During the day when all regions are awake and aligned. And so we really have to find our time. We have to show when we're on. But even more importantly, we need to show when we're off, that it's okay to take a break, because burnout is such a real thing. And I have such a strong belief that burnout is our next pandemic. We cannot keep the pace of increased productivity, always on, in front of screens, back-to-back meetings without any breaks. There's just no sustainability in that.
Yeah, I mean, and gosh, I'm sure some people listening might be wishing that their leaders would take the same approach. But part of this is it's very courageous. It's very courageous as a leader to say, I'm aware of the impact, the ripple effects that my own leadership has. And therefore, how I show up will also set the tone somewhat for how everybody else feels that they have to show up. But it's vulnerable, and it's because sometimes, yeah, it's like you might want to be sending something out there, or that might suit you best, but it's actually having this awareness of the whole system and your role in that system. And so where do you find that courage, that leadership courage, that authentic leadership?
A couple of things. Like, courage is one of my truths. I have 3 truths. One is being courageous. The second is resilience, always being resilient and being able to bounce back. And then the third is authentic. Always show my true self, whether it's good or bad, whether I'm having a great day or not so great day. Why do we have to mask that? Because we're only human. But where do I get this courage from? Courage is such an interesting thing, and I'm sure it's from my mom. But and actually it stems back to primary school. I remember our primary school motto was "Do it now." And in Latin, it's agite statim. And, from that moment in school, when every Monday we'd say, do it now, in life, everything became, don't let anything hang around, like action it now, and it's funny because if I don't do something now, it tends to like weigh me down and become quite heavy. And so I've always had the view of just do it now. What can be worse than, leaving it undone and then worrying about it long term? And I can deal with the consequences as they come. And, it hasn't always been easy. I mean, courage is one of those things. I remember when I was 23 and my boss said to me, I want you to get on a plane and go to Europe and, learn this inside sales motion all on your own and be happy while you're doing it. And that was great. But, you're 23. You haven't explored the world. You're on your own. You need friends. You're a very social individual, and at 25, I moved to Australia on my own and I didn't know anybody. And so I've dived headfirst into situations where I haven't known what's on the other side. And, sometimes they've worked out and sometimes they haven't. But it's the resilience, my second truth, that gets me over the failure and the learning from failure that helps me, look through it, look past it and continue to move forward. And I really believe that just being very open and honest around, what makes me happy, what makes, me genuinely pitch up as a leader are these three attributes and my three truths.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, when you were talking, I was thinking in my head, firstly, how amazing is that motto of just do it now, and learning that at a young age as well, like just go for it, throw yourself in. And so many different leaders and inspirational people talk about that and the importance of kind of just cracking on, especially entrepreneurs. But it also requires an element of confidence, of trusting yourself, of also being prepared to, like you say, it doesn't always pan out. And so being prepared to be resilient then when things might not go your way. And I'm just wondering, obviously this has been instilled in you from a very young age, but are there examples of where you have been able to fortify yourself, give yourself that trust and that courage to propel yourself forward?
Yes, I can think of one, and it's actually a story that took us back from Singapore and actually my time with you to Australia, where my daughter was turning 4 and we were preparing to move back home so that she could start primary school here in Australia. And at the time I wasn't working, so I'd taken some time off to be mom, and that was on the back of a very hard decision to actually leave my time at my previous employment to look after my daughter, because I'd been working so hard, and I'm not sure, I'll probably reflect on this later, but I'm not sure whether I had made some trade-offs that I shouldn't have made off. But my daughter started walking, and I remember I was traveling at the time, and I got a text from my helper saying that my daughter started walking, she's going really well. And I felt so disconnected to my daughter I think it must have been about 10 months. And I felt so guilty in being a mom and such a failure that I decided to take some time out. And this was the time that I was going to invest in my daughter, and I would never get this time back again. And so I took probably about 18 months off to be with Summer. And I remember saying, gosh, how am I ever going to get back to the workplace? And I had a conversation with my husband, and he said to me, Vicky, if we want to go back to Australia, why don't you start looking and we can start preparing for that? And I remember thought, wow, moving back to Australia, different country. I've been in Singapore 10 years. What am I going to find? Like, what is my next step? I've been out of work for a couple of years now. I almost felt like, who would have me? Which is ridiculous. Like, I look back and I think about all of my years in tech and leadership. It was just one of those vulnerable moments. And I put my head down, and in 6 weeks, I was literally offered a role with relocation to move back to Australia to be a VP of a SaaS organization. And, that really charged me up. That really got me through some really dark times, thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to move my family back? This is on me. It's time to go home, and it's time to be with my family in Australia again. And it was tough, because a mom going back to work is probably one of the hardest experiences you'll ever go through. Your self-worth is limited, because you feel like you've just been focusing on family, and that your brain hasn't been triggered sufficiently in the recent years. And your time on the playground is so meaningful at the time, but as soon as you want to put your, what I call, a work head on, you start going, wow, I'm out of touch. The lingo has changed, the marketplace has changed, the dynamics have changed, the stock tickers that I used to follow aren't big anymore. So how do I become relevant again, and how do I find myself again and prepare myself for that next phase? And I got through that, but it was really hard, really challenging. And in the moment, I didn't think I would do it, but I did it. Of course I did it. And anyone can do it. It's just about putting your head down and asking for help if you need help.
I mean, I am totally covered in sort of goosebumps, and I think it's such an important thing that you're pointing to here. And I just want to acknowledge also your bravery and courage in sharing that experience, because, it's a story that a lot of mums and some dads will resonate greatly with. And there is so So much truth in the experiences you've described of grappling with, struggling with, like who I have been and who I want to be and what that means for my child and our family and all of those sorts of things. And so firstly, thank you for sharing that with us. And also knowing you, I mean, I know that it was crazy that you would think you wouldn't be able to find a job because you are so employable. But it's not a rational thing that you feel in that moment, right? It's something that there is that disconnect. And so how did you kind of go from that place, feeling back into your strength then as a leader, re-engaging back into the workforce, or how did you start to build back together that identity of yourself as this whole individual?
It was hard. I won't go against it at all. It was hard. And there were small wins. They were small daily wins. Mm-hmm. Small steps along the way is what really helps propel you forward.
Yeah.
I think, having a conversation and expecting to kill it is unique, right? And it's one in a million. It's really about building a plan where you identify who the people are who are invested in your success. It could be 2 or 3 or 4, having conversations with them. It's having conversations with recruiters, doing a little bit of research. So baby steps, don't jump into anything without people around you to support you.
Yeah, again, there's that theme of people. So what is it that about people and surrounding yourself with people that is so instrumental for you?
People encourage me, people inspire me. When I'm sitting in a room, I pay so much attention to what people are saying. I actually embrace imposter syndrome because I know how much I can learn from these people around me and from these great minds who are, breaking through these technology barriers, who are having, the most amazing milestones and achievements and accomplishments in work and their personal life. And you can only learn from them. And so I see, my engagement with people as just everyday learning opportunities to understand diverse thought and perspective and not just think about what I believe in. There's a statement that I heard very early on in my life, my working career, and that is, you will agree with people who use your words and who use your sentences because you have like mind, and I don't agree with that. I think when people don't use your words and your sentences, it's great to step in their shoes and understand their perspective, because that just gives you an opportunity to broaden out your horizon.
There's something in here also about like learning, broadening your horizons, perpetually putting yourself in the deep end. When I'm hearing you talk about these things, I'm thinking it's a real growth mindset. It's really kind of courageous place to go to say, I'm going to challenge myself by hearing things that might be divergent from what I believe, but that's a learning process. Is that something that you've always had?
Absolutely. And I think one of the areas that when I think about success, it's about, how organizations invest in diversity and equity in that sense of belonging, because it does allow people to be themselves. And you don't have to be that shadow or that overlay that you want people to think you are, but you're not actually. And so I really, truly believe that organizations that embrace, growth mindsets are organizations where people really thrive.
Yeah. And I love that you touch on belonging, because it's all sort of comes together. There's authenticity. If you can show up as yourself, then you create a culture where people feel that they can belong, and bring these two things together, everybody can thrive. So how do you, when you think about your purpose or the impact that you work hard to create, on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, what is your kind of guiding star here?
I'm going to go back to a quick story, if you don't mind, Bex. If I think about my own purpose and what's led me, I look back maybe, 8 years, and I remember having a conversation with my husband, and we would have been married probably 5 years by then. And he said to me, where are we going? We're in Singapore. We both have great careers. What's next for us? And I remember sitting down with him and writing some things down and going, okay, we've done this. And it was like a checklist. And it didn't feel like we had any big inspirational goals. And I said to him, should we have a family? And he said, I don't think we're ready just yet. And I thought, well, what else could be our purpose right now? Like we're both doing well. And he said, you know what? What can we do that's going to test us and challenge our thinking? And and the conversation was really around career. It was, how do we get better in our careers? And actually we took a step back and we thought about it. It wasn't about our careers, because we were both doing exceptionally well. It was, what was our unit? How was our unit excelling together? And that's actually when we came to the point and decided, and he was right all along, that our purpose was to build a family. It was to focus on people other than ourselves. It was to look externally. It was to do volunteering. It was to give back to society and to charities. And we were so focused on our own success that we knew this was our opportunity to actually look outward now and make a bigger success outwards. And that's where we really got that fulfillment from. Mm-hmm. And so coming back to your question of how do I find purpose, it's external for me. It's around, how happy our family are and how happy our relationships are and how much fun we're having together and how many moments we can celebrate. And then on a professional front, it's, how is our culture? How is the retention in our team? How are we thriving together? What are we doing that tells me that our culture is flourishing? And when I think about that and I diagnose that a little bit more, it's really around, what does our diversity slate look like? When was the last time we celebrated something that wasn't our natural belief? When was the last time we celebrated people's culture? When was the last time we did something fun together? We grew together. We learned something together, and we took a career challenge together. And so I look at all of those aspects, and it all comes out to this external play of, what are the influencing factors in building my purpose? It's around how many people we can help make successful or help build their dream, and how do we directly contribute to that? And that's just through our time investment.
Yeah, it's funny. It's so powerful what you're talking about, and this idea that we do need to first have a strong understanding of self and have looked within, but then the opportunity is then to look out and see, how can my strengths, my skills, my passion, my purpose then contribute more broadly. And, I think that that's really where things start to manifest, right, for communities, and to really attack some of the big challenges that we've all got as a society.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering, like, I know that you have this role, that you play this role with leaders and individuals all over the world. But for listeners listening, imagining that they are, at an earlier stage in their career, or figuring things out, or wanting to be where you are at this sort of empowered place, what are some of the mantras, advice, things that you would want them to hear or take away from this conversation that have helped you in your journey?
Absolutely. And that's such a big question, Beck. I think one of the areas that I would absolutely, encourage new leaders to focus on is to be bold. Be bold in, what they do and what their brand is. Be bold in how they present themselves. Because, I think first off, a leader that second guesses themselves, that doesn't have confidence, that, is leading teams and people, needs to do so brazenly. And, you're in this role for a reason. And I truly believe that confidence is what gets managers to that next step. Confidence in their ability, confidence in their people, confidence in the product that they sell, confidence in their customers and their customer journeys. And being bold and having confidence around all of these areas is what really helps propel them. One of the biggest issues I see today, or as people and new managers move through the ladder rungs, is this lack of confidence as they go up. And it affects people differently, new mothers getting back onto the ladder, people who are on this first time journey, or people who are moving from a manager to a director, thinking, can I do it or I can't do it, and not having that confidence and understanding how they've got there, like being very conscious around what's got them to this point and why they can do it, and focusing on that why and believing in your why and being able to articulate your why with confidence is something that I would encourage every single leader to really hold on to and be bold about.
I mean, yes. I just underline that, take that in, write that down wherever you are listening. I mean, I think it's such good advice and such important message for people to hear, especially as you say, sort of aspiring leaders or leaders at the start of their journey. And this conversation has been just littered with ideas that people can take and channel. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with or share that you think would be useful?
I used to often focus on the things that I wasn't in control of, and that became the centerpiece of my conversation. And I had an amazing leader at the time who made me aware of the idea of your center of concern versus your center of control. And he said to me, Vicky, it's so interesting talking to you, but I don't know why you spend so much time talking about the areas that you can't control. The things that you can control are, how you do your job, who you sell to, how you sell, following a proven sales process. But when you start, going on about areas that you can't control, it seems to distract you from the things that you're great at. And that made me very aware of being able to decouple the things that I'm good at and the things that I can influence versus the areas that, are nice to talk about, but aren't going to have any outcome, that are, you typically look at cross-functional issues, typically look at controls or processes that have no meaning, but you think they do. But when you actually look at the issue, they have no bearing. They're just a distraction. And so it's being conscious about that. And I think, it's been so great just talking to you, Beck. You've really made me think about my time in this tech world and my career and my own journey. And, I just get humbled every time I have these conversations because, it's so great talking to you and learning from you and seeing your path and your journey and just being, humbled by what you're doing and the impact that you're having on so many great leaders today.
Oh gosh, well, thank you, Vicky. That's incredibly meaningful to me from you. But and I am so grateful because I have had the privilege of knowing and being influenced by you myself and the way that you think about your role as a leader, your role as a human in this workforce. But I think in this world, but I think the conversation today has really also given a lot more. Like there's so much that I can hear behind why you're doing the things that you're doing, the impact, the purpose, your foundational statements, your truths, all of these things that I think are really very clear for those of us that have been listening to your story about how you've kind of created the life that you have. But honestly, I'm so grateful. And I think I'm looking forward to one day growing up into the leader that you already are. And so thank you for taking the time. I'm so grateful and so touched that you were able to share.
Of course, my absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Not Just Anything for Women Who Want It Whole. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to our weekly podcast and leave us a review. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here with us, and we look forward to having you join again. And remember, be brave, be whole, be you.